Thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's start the conversation on State of the Nation. We'd like to hear your views at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. What really should be in the agenda? Let me introduce my guest, starting from my father's right. Honorable Boni Alwale is here, Senator for Kakamega. Asante sana for making time.
Thank you.
Honorable John Mbadi is here, nominated Member of Parliament. Thank you very much for making time.
Thank you.
And Honorable Jane Kagiri, woman rep like Kipia. Asante sana for making time.
Thank you.
We're still waiting for His Excellency Francis Mwangangi, Deputy Governor for Machakos. As soon as he comes in, we'll rope him into the conversation. But I'll start with you, Honorable Mbadi. What really should be in the agenda? There's two technical teams that have now been formed in these talks between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. But initially we had seen a list of issues to be addressed, which were different on both sides. But now that the technical teams are at work and expected to give the report by Monday, what really should be in the agenda of these talks?
What really should be in the agenda depends on which political divide you are in. You know, I'm a member of Azimio coalition, and already we have spelled out what should be in the agenda, beginning with cost of living. And then the other issue is the reforms of IBC. Let me call it electoral reforms. There is also the question about democracy and respect to multi-party democracy and respect to political parties. The other issue that is also on the table, which needs to be looked at, is inclusivity, which I think you have just talked about. That what does it really mean? When you talk about inclusivity, the other side already picks it out and thinks it is getting involved in nusumkati or handshake or government of national unity. Far from it. Inclusivity is just about making sure that government reflects the face of the country. I want to add here that we, in the last government, had a handshake, and actually one of the issues that we discussed was inclusivity. And there is no time that we shared that government. We never got into that government as NASA coalition then, or ODM if you want, but at least we felt that there was some kind of inclusivity in subsequent appointments. It might have not been perfect. So that is what we want to see. We don't want to see where appointments are skewed towards one or two ethnic communities. This talk of shareholders must just stop, and we have a government for Kenya and by Kenyans.
And yet the other side doesn't agree with any of these issues except the IEBC reconstitution. Doesn't that then mean that there's going to be a stalemate? Because like you've said, that the talks depends on which side of the political divide you're in, though they committed that they'll put Kenya first.
Well, you know, I'm a member of the Azimio coalition, which has committed itself to these talks. Usually, whenever a decision has been made, a collective decision has been made, I support that decision because I belong to that coalition. I have my personal reservations about these talks. I really don't see serious commitments, especially from the other side, but let's give it a chance. Yes, there are differences. The other side has also come up with their own set of agenda, which is normal, because that is why negotiation and discussions become necessary. If you are in agreement in all aspects, then there would be no need for dialogue. There would be no need for negotiations. So I would imagine that by the end of the preliminaries leading to the talks, they will have agreed on agenda. And that agenda should be to further the interests of the Kenyan public.
Okay. Let's deal with these issues one by one, and I'll bring in on Boni Alwale on this. Is there a need to review the inclusivity and have a face of Kenya, like the Azimio team says?
For lack of specific words to say it, what they are simply saying is that let us discuss how to share the country. That thing of inclusivity purports that at the end of the election, you then go and start sharing positions away from the decision of the voters. You see, if the real excuse is that there is fear that a certain community will be locked out, it is the assumption that a president is not elected to serve the whole country, but is elected to serve either his own community or his community plus the communities that stood behind him. The Constitution is very clear that the president, once in office, he's supposed to serve the entire nation. And the claims by the Honorable Mbadi cannot be backed by evidence. Even the same government that they don't like very much has already appointed leaders across the board, not just to low-key positions, but some of the high-ranking positions are occupied by Kenyans from communities that were strongly in favor of Azimio. So it's not a non-issue. I mean, it's a non-issue. It should not come on the table. We should talk about more tangible things. No. But that does not mean that I'm saying it's wrong for Kenya Kwanza, for Azimio to put that particular issue on the table. Every issue deserves a chance to be discussed. So it will be discarded after a reasonable discussion between the two groups.
Okay. Honorable Kagiri, is this an agenda that should be on the table?
Just like my senior Honorable Mbadi has said, personally, I have my own views on the talks. But allow me to add and say that I also don't think it's an agenda that should be on the table, because looking at the Kenya Kwanza government, it's an inclusive government. Unless it is particular people that Azimio feel should be in that government, that they would bring in the aspect of inclusivity. But otherwise stated, if you look at our government, it includes every tribe of this country. Every representation in this country is considered in our government. So I don't think it should be part of the agenda. But that said, we allow them to start the talks today, agree on what the agenda will be, and we see how we go about it.
How is it that you talk of having specific people in government, and yet it's your side that has suggested the office of the opposition?
Why I believe our side is suggesting the office of leader of opposition is because we have to bring an end to this winner takes it all. And I believe that is why we find our people getting onto the streets for demonstrations, because the minute somebody comes in second with the presidential election, they assume that they've lost it all. But we need somebody who will be in that office to manage to keep the government in check, which is actually what we lacked in the previous regime. And we saw what it led to: excessive borrowing, a lot of corruption, unspoken about. But with an official office of opposition, our president has said he's ready to be monitored, he's ready to be checked, and he's ready for his government to be accountable. Okay. So that is why we want the office of the leader of opposition.
But have you guys done an audit and seen that really the appointments are skewed in one way or another? Because this is something that even the president himself has talked about, nusu mkate. And Boni Alwali is saying inclusivity is just a rosy language to say that you want to share positions. Kagiri is saying that you want specific people in government for you to feel included.
You see, let me just put it in perspective. First, elections were conducted and Ruto is the president. The part that Honorable Boni Alwali is talking about, that we probably are pushing, that there would be no need for elections if we go and share. That is an assumption that we want to ask Ruto to disband his cabinet and reconstitute it afresh. I don't think that is in the mind of Azimio. That's not in our mind. What we are talking about in terms of inclusivity is where when appointments come to the floor of the House, and I've been in that House from last year, and I've been seeing the names which come to that House. I may not have the specifics here, but if you look at the names, we have been complaining even when we approve those names. And we just approve them because the numbers are skewed towards Kenya Kwanza. But if we had an objective, independent parliament, many of those names would be rejected on the basis of inclusivity. And so it is not just a question of cabinet and the PSS, even if you look at the list of the PSS, it was skewed towards specific communities. You cannot, some communities were overrepresented in the list of principal secretaries. Cabinet secretaries, again, you can see. It is not just a question of one ethnic community. There is no party that represents an ethnic community. What we want to see is the face of the country. And it is even in our constitution that the cabinet should reflect the face of the country. You have no choice about it. It is not about where you get the votes. It is there in the constitution. But let me just conclude by what Honorable Jane said. You see, the issue of winner takes it all, it has been on the table. Remember, BBI was a lot about that. And we talked about the creation of the prime cabinet secretary, we call it prime minister or whatever name you can give it. We talked about official opposition. At that time, Azimio, which was just in its formative stage, was attacked, and we were branded as creating positions. I'm happy that now Kenya Kwanza has seen the light and are bringing it on the table. I have no problem with that. Let it be discussed. But there are other outstanding issues that need to be discussed. Yeah. In a nutshell, I want to say, if you look at the appointments that come today to the floor of the House, appointments that are made in our parastatals, they are skewed towards specific communities. You cannot have a whole energy sector almost being run by members of one community. It is immoral, it is unethical, it is not something that we can encourage in modern Kenya. It is what brings all these issues after elections. Because the moment we go to elections, we believe we should elect people from our communities so that when elections are over, we can benefit. And that is why when communities find that they are not going to be in government, then it becomes a big issue. Yeah. We must avoid a situation where we make appointments based on our ethnic identities.
But even if this conversation happens, and yes, they talk about inclusivity and have a discussion with the team, what is the end game? Because like you said, the appointments have already been done, they've passed through parliament already, they can't fire the current existing executive, they can't fire the current parastatal chiefs. Are we talking about something that goes... How will it be achieved?
The government is still running, Trevor, and there will be still more appointments. We are saying in subsequent appointments, we must respect our national identity. We must know that we have brought ourselves together to form a nation. Actually, this country is a country with very many ethnic communities and groups. We could have been many states, but we decided to come and join together and call ourselves Kenyans. So long as we are still a country, we must make sure that whatever we do, the decisions we take, reflects the face of that country.
Okay. His Excellency Francis Mwangangi is now joining us, DG Machakos. And before you came in, we were talking about the talks between Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. What are your thoughts on these talks? What should be on the agenda, and what is most critical for the people right now?
Thank you, Trevor. First, I want to comment the two political formations. That was the only way out. Because when you have a half of the country talking or taking a different path from what the center holds, that is a threat to the unity, to the existence of the nationhood Kenya. Now, I think three issues are very key. One is to have a fair referee, that is the IEBC. It is very good that we, at the end of the day, whatever comes out of the talks is acceptable to majority of political players in this country. Number two, I think the issue of winner takes it all can be addressed if we have maybe the losing bit, the losing party leadership being represented in a legislature. I'm talking about the official leader of minority in our parliament. That is very important, because it is in the parliament that the whole government revolves around, including the executive, including the judiciary. Everyone finds his or her way to parliament. That's very critical. Now, we have informal prime minister in the current structure of government. If they entrench, they recommend entrenching the same into our law, the better. Because we are still addressing the issue of inclusivity in national government, and I think there is also another question, which is the main thing of all this. Anything that touches on reduction of the cost of living, that is to the interest of majority of Kenyans. I know there are Kenyans, but very few, who do not know even whenever we are talking of cost of energy, which touches almost every aspect of our Kenyans. They don't understand. Since they were born, they never got to their pocket to purchase even the slightest percentage of fuel, of a liter of petroleum. But majority of Kenyans are feeling the heat. So any initiative that will address the bringing down the cost of living, that will also allow Kenyans to exist peacefully. Okay. In the absence of that, I'm foreseeing restless Kenyans. Yeah. I'm foreseeing high taxation regime continuing. That makes Kenya unfavorable for business in the region, okay. Making us lose largely to our friends. So I think agreeing first to sit from my leadership in Azimio, from the ruling administration, was the best decision ever. Okay. God sent, in my view. All right. Let me bring in Honorable Raila on this, and we're talking about these issues one at a time. We'll see what the technical teams come up with at the end of it all, but we already know what both sides have tabled. One other issue that Azimio team is talking about is respect for political parties. Is this an issue that should be discussed so that when elections are done, whichever side that has won doesn't cannibalize the other side by having their members move and cross the floor? Is this a conversation that should be had?
Never. For the reason that if Azimio is unable to manage its own coalition, if it finds problems in managing its own political parties, they should not use it as an excuse to destroy people's property, destroy businesses, and loss of lives. Management of political parties, the farthest we can go as the leadership of the country is to ask the parliament to put in place enabling legislation that would help management of political parties. And thank God, this is already there. So if Azimio is seeing an area of weakness in the current legislative structure, they have sufficient representation in the National Assembly, in the Senate. They can propose amendments so as to strengthen the laws that are responsible for management and governance of political parties. To then use it as an excuse to make our economy come to a standstill the way we do every general election is an excuse rather than the real reason. So I am saying they better look for a better reason. Okay. The real reason why this thing came there is not because initially it was on the cards. In bipartisan talks round one, where I was a member, it became an issue because of the membership of Honorable Kainan, who was from Jubilee. And when we saw that, because he had been proposed from our side, then we removed him. And that was the end of the story. Now, when the issue continued evolving, they then made it a national issue because President Uhuru was having problems. There was disquiet within his party. And they were saying it is the government side which was stoking the fires that were taking place in Jubilee. So, again, down to management issues. Yeah. If people, I have personally been involved in starting discontent within a political party. Once upon a time, I was a member of Fort Kenya, and we started New Fort Kenya, which became a splinter party from it, and life went on. So it's because the former Prime Minister is not used to internal party democracy. And this is why he finds any voice of dissent, and he sees dark forces behind it, refusing to accept that that is internal party democracy. Let me tell you, There are certain parts in this country, there are certain communities in this country which have lost their power to elect even an MCA. For you to be elected an MCA in those unfortunate areas, you must get the nod from the top leadership. So voters just go to the polling station to vote for the name that is on that party. It is this lack of internal party democracy that Azimio wants to visit on the whole country, that we cannot allow them.
Okay, Kagiri, is this a conversation that should be had before I bring in Buddy and hear his side? Respect
Trevor,
for political parties.
Yesterday I listened very carefully to the opening remarks of the two chairs, and particularly to His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka. And in a span of less than 1 minute, he spoke about peace and prosperity twice. And for me, for Azimio to be talking about association with other parties, I would consider it a very big excuse they're taking advantage of. Because number one, the Constitution allows us for freedom of association. Number two, there are parties which we all know as a country that were forced or coerced to be in affiliations that they went into before the election. After the election, parties were allowed to decide if they would want to continue those relations or they would want to move to other relations. So number one, I think we need to respect that in the true spirit of the Constitution, as he claimed in his speech, and allow people to decide where they want to be. I would also want to look at a situation of maybe in Nyanza. We have an MP like David Oching. David Oching ran on his own party and was elected, but could be the manifesto he would associate better with is the Kenya Kwanza one. So immediately after the election, he came and joined Kenya Kwanza. But look at a scenario, if he had declared to be with the Kenya Kwanza before the election, automatically in that particular area, he would not have been elected. So I believe we need to give room for such people to associate and affiliate with whichever political affiliations they would want to join. And I believe that's what we talk of prosperity in a country. Allow people to be who they are. Allow them to associate with whom they want to associate with. If it is his constituency and he feels it's going to benefit more on the Kenya Kwanza side, he is allowed to do that.
Okay.
Yes.
Buddy, how would this look like, respect for political parties?
Let me just put it again in perspective. Trevor, you cannot claim that you want to be oversighted by the vibrant and robust when you poach members from the same opposition and make them part of your government illegally. You see, sometimes when I listen to the argument from my two colleagues, it becomes very interesting. The more reason why we are saying we need respect for political parties, the same reasons that they're giving. Especially, Jane, when you talk about Ochieng as an example, that's the more reason why we are calling for discipline in our political parties. Because Ochieng went to the people of Kenya and cornered them. You are talking about the rights of Ochieng. What of the right of the voters in Uganda who elected Ochieng because they believed Ochieng was part of Azimio, and the voters in Uganda identify more with the Azimio policies? When now Ochieng comes to parliament and single-handedly decides that he wants to enjoy his rights to associate with Kenya Kwanza without going back to the same people who voted for him for reference, then are you calling that really democracy? You are promoting the democratic space of Ochieng as an individual, but you are definitely trampling on the democracy or the democratic space of thousands of Uganda residents who probably could have not voted for Ochieng if he clearly indicated to them that he would not associate with Azimio. So that is why we are saying, if you feel that you are not interested anymore in associating with the same political grouping that you associated with during elections, the honorable thing to do is resign your seat, go back to the electorate and seek for fresh mandate. If they agree with you that now they want development, they were voting for you in Azimio because Azimio was going to form government, and now that Kenya Kwanza has formed government, they support your stand to join Kenya Kwanza. They would demonstrate it at the ballot. So what is this that which you want these members to continue supporting the coalition that they were not elected on? Secondly, it is not just ending with those who are in other political parties, as Honorable Boni Alwali has put it. Even ODM, which has never given any indication that we want to be part of Kenya Kwanza, there are members of ODM who are, for all intent and purposes, now members of Kenya Kwanza. They vote with Kenya Kwanza. They speak Kenya Kwanza. And they are members of ODM, and they were elected on ODM ticket. The most the most honorable thing to do is to go and seek for fresh mandate. My own member of parliament is associating with Kenya Kwanza. He has never sought the opinion of the electorate, or at least one that I'm aware of. So who has given these members of parliament who has approved their association with Kenya Kwanza? That is what we are saying. So how should it be discussed? We are calling for respect of multi-party democracy. Our constitution speaks to it. Kenya is a multi-party democracy. Yeah. That provision in law was not just there to fill the pages of our 2010 constitution. Okay. It was for a purpose.
Yeah, but Mwangangi, isn't this a personal decision? Because you can't force someone to stay where they don't want to stay.
But there is a provision in the law to allow you to do that after a period of time. But the most important thing is I agree with the Honorable Bandi totally, 100%. It is good when you go seeking a mandate to represent people, to go and legislate on their behalf, to go and oversight on their behalf, you consult them. That's why we have public engagement, public dialogue, public participation in our law. And then I've seen a lot of immorality in our politics in this country. There's a term that is very common in Kenya. When a politician wants to con colleagues or those he or she represents, they go talking about I'm rushing here so that I can gain development. What does the law say? The current head of state, not once, almost over 20 times, he has said he will allow the law to take its course. Meaning, whatever the law dictates, the Kenya Kwanza administration is keen to stick to what the law directs. If that is the case, it means instead of lying to us, you are going there to get a devolution, to get more for devolution, to get more for development, to get more for your people. Why can't you do it following the law? Because we need, nowadays, it's not like in the past. Yeah. We have 2 levels of government. We have budget is, over 3/4 of the budget is done in parliament. Why don't you do it within there? By the way, let me tell you something. These colleagues here, I once was a member of parliament. If today we are speaking different language with Honorable Dr. Karwale, but if now we are here, 4 of us, and we are told Karwale's son is being beaten out here, you will have nobody here, including Honorable Kagiri. We will get out and be with Honorable Karwale. So I don't see this business. I don't understand at all what some people mean. And that, in my view, is a very big threat to democracy. We need a vibrant opposing side. Yeah. We need a strong government. That can only happen if the 2 sides are exercising their mandate without any influence from anywhere. Okay. And that is how Kenyans are going to benefit from the best policies. Okay. Because Honorable Bandia, Kagiri, and Karwale, they will debate it, trying to advance what they told the electorate. Okay. Finally, when we start poaching members of parliament, or rather being bought, because that is what happens, what it means, we compromise the quality of debate in the House, we compromise the quality of the laws that finally come out, and that is how sometimes when Kenyans go to court, some provisions are declared unconstitutional. And we weaken our political parties, because if we elected somebody to go and articulate policies, or rather what the parties believe in parliament, and now you shift to start advocating, other than remaining in Kenya Kwanza, you move to Azimio and start advocating issues touching on Azimio, then what are you doing? Because you told your electorates, elect me on this, because this is their manifesto. This is what we are going to do. Once you get to parliament, you start changing. That is conmanship of the highest order.
Okay, I have to take a quick break. break here. When we come back, continue these issues. We're looking at them one at a time, but also we know the two technical teams will bring a report on Monday and agree on the issues. But already what was tabled by both sides, they don't seem to agree. They only agree on one thing, IBC reconstitution. Everything else is up for debate. We'd like to hear your views at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Is the hashtag Daybreak. See you in just a bit.